Welcome to Update 38 Caster Druid. In this video I'm going to be going over some of the changes to the Season's Herald tree that were changed in Update 38 and some of the other changes as well. And this video will primarily be for folks that haven't really taken a look at the Caster Druid changes since they were made in Update 38, and specifically for folks that are interested in my build, and I'll be giving my review and thoughts of some of the changes and maybe some critiques as well. So this is coming way later than I wanted it to. I really wanted to do this just a few weeks after Update 38 came out, but better late than never. I have had a chance to play through several lives since these changes, so I'm going to be giving you my review based on my experience using these changes. So let's get right into it. I did a review of these changes on Lamania, back a few months ago, but that was before I really had a chance to use them. So I'm going to be actually taking that video down once I post this one. Alright, first thing I want to mention is that there's this pretty cool feat that was added that disables the visual properties for your elemental stances, and that's called Veil the Elements, which I have active right now. I'm actually in water elemental form. You can see the buff bars here up top, but I have the visual disabled. Some people really don't like this, and I'm not crazy about it. I think it's a little too translucent, and especially the fire elemental form. Well, depending on your environment, you can actually be kind of hard to see. So I will run with that visual off a lot of times, and you still do have some little effects. I don't seem to see them now, but let me go into fire elemental form. You still have some flames coming off you, so you still get a little bit of effect, which is kind of cool. I thought there was some watery things. Yeah, there they are. Okay. Maybe when you first click Veil the Elements, it disables those too. No, there they go now. So not sure why that was the case. So you still got a little bit of watery and fiery effect, which is cool. I'm really glad that they added that. And other people, by the way, still see you in water elemental form or fire elemental form, even when you have it the visual disabled like this. It's actually only toggles the visual for the player. All right. So let's take a look at the enhancement tree. And one of the awesome changes is that your SLA line was moved down a tier. It used to be that Beguile was here in Tier 1, and that was a prerequisite for all of the SLAs, and you would get Produce Flame in Tier 2, Creeping Cold Tier 3, and you would get Call Lightning in Tier 4, and the Salt Ray is actually a new SLA, which is awesome. And this had the effect of making caster druids pretty lame for the first few levels. You couldn't really effectively play as a caster right away because you really didn't have any casting power, and what little bit you had, you could burn through your mana really quick. Well, having SLAs available right away is really awesome. So you can get the Produce Flame SLA right at level 1, that you can get the Creeping Cold SLA at level 2, the Call Lightning at level 3. I mean, before we had to wait till level 6, I think, until we get the SLA of Call Lightning. We got regular Call Lightning at level 5, but we didn't have the SLA, I think, until level 6. I think late into level 6 too. So now we can get that at level 3, which is really, really awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got, and I'm going to be going over, I won't be going over the other druid trees. I don't play melees, and I don't know them well enough to speak to them, but I will be going over the enhancements that I'm using and why in the Nature's Protector tree. I don't use any from the Nature's Warrior tree. So one change, which is right here in the cores, the first two cores, is that you now have stances for your seasons, whereas before there was this awkward alternating seasons. Every 5 minutes you would alternate between summer and winter, and you could override that up to every 7 minutes if you had a certain enhancement, which they did away with. Now you can just choose whatever season you want to be in, and you can run in that season all the time. And it doesn't matter what elemental form you're in. So like if you're in fire elemental form, you could run in winter season if you wanted to, or vice versa. So you just have to load these up in your buff bar. You can see I have the winter season toggled. And what's neat is when you change season, or when you change forms, when you change into fire elemental form, it will automatically change you over to the summer season, which has beneficial effects for like fire spells. For example, when you change back into water elemental form, it'll put you into the winter season. But I could choose, if I wanted to, I could switch over to fire elemental form and then activate winter if I wanted to. So I think that was a really awesome change. That was actually a change that I had been requesting for a long time, and I was really happy to see that implemented. And the other, let's see, the other benefits that you get from being in the season, I think, are the same. There's +5 spell power with fire, light, sonic, and force, and positive spells. So actually some was added to that. At least force was added, possibly some others, maybe even like sonic. I can't remember which one was affected by it before, but there are more types of spells affected by each season now. So that's another pretty cool change. Although I'm not sure that force really makes sense, but they did give us a force SLA, so in that sense it kind of does. So you have up to 30 extra spell power in the season if you have all your cores. And in the winter season, this affects, let's see, water, acid, earth, and electric spells. Up to 30 if you have all the cores. And your caster level is increased by 1 as part of that tier as well. You still get one universal spell power per action point spent in Season's Herald. That's the same as before. So moving on to tier 3, innate, +1 max caster levels for spells of your appropriate season. I think that is basically the same as before, and then they added, just for flavor, the effects of your shillelagh spell are doubled. So I never even use that spell. I've had people encourage me to give it a try for low levels, but especially now that I can be more of a caster in low levels, I don't feel like I need that. Prior to update 38, when I was like level 1 through 3, I would actually run around in wolf form in melee because it just wasn't a lot of value in casting spells at that point. But now that the SLAs have been moved down a tier, I can be a caster right at level 1, which is really cool. Okay, tier 4 is the Sunburst SLA. That has not changed, except for the fact that the cooldown is now 20 seconds, whereas before it used to be almost all of the SLA cooldowns were reduced, and that was a really good move because the cooldowns for Druid's SLAs were ridiculously high compared to all the other spellcasters. I mean, even other like slow, quote-unquote slow casters like a cleric, like even a cleric's SLAs they came off cooldown a lot faster than Druid's. So I'm glad that that's another really great change. So at tier 5, we have the Storm of Vengeance SLA. That has not changed. I was really pushing for a lower cooldown. I think 2 minutes is too high. I mean, this is a cool spell, but, even the regular spell with a 1 minute cooldown, it's a cool spell, but it is in no way overpowered or warrants such a ridiculously long cooldown. So I think that the regular one they should both be reduced by half. I think the regular one should be a 30-second cooldown, and this should be a minute. In no way makes Druids overpowered. In fact, that was one of my criticisms of the update, is that they didn't do enough. Druids were really behind the curve before update 38. They made some really good changes, which I was happy about, but they just didn't do enough. Druids are never going to be overpowered. You're never going to see the power gamers play a caster Druid. They're so far away from the leading edge of the power curve that I think that there was definitely more room for improvement. And I would have liked to have seen another SLA added, for example. I would have liked to have seen a reduced cooldown time of Storm of Vengeance, for example. So I think Druids did need more. Great changes. I'm really happy with what we got overall, but definitely I feel like more needed to happen. So the result of that is basically like people who already love caster druids, you know, they're going to be able to love them even a little bit more. But the changes that were made probably aren't going to win over the hearts and minds of anybody who was sort of on the fence about caster druid. Probably not going to bring people over into the caster druid category. So it would have been nice if there were some more enticing things added. Who knows, maybe they'll add more, but you know, like I said, druids, they are so far from OP. They're never going to be OP, and so just more needs to be done. Alright, that's my little rant. So, Storm of Vengeance, like I said, hasn't changed. Actually, there was a change. The way that the spell scales better now. I think it scales with your levels better than it used to. It does scale better. I can't remember exactly the differences, but it does scale better. Okay, Hierophant. So I was a little bit disappointed in the Capstone. This was another letdown for me. So you get +2 Wisdom and Constitution. So we used to get +2 Wisdom before. Now we get +2 Constitution. Hey, that's great, you know, especially for me. I'm a tanky build, so I like the con. So that's not bad, getting +2 Wisdom and Constitution, but what's left? You get Transmutation and Evocation spells get +1 to the DCs. Well, Evocation was added. That's a good move. Before it was Transmutation and Conjuration get +2. And it was a no-brainer to add Evocation. Really, they should have just said, they should have just left it the way it was and added Evocation to it, so the Evocation got +2. But instead, they got rid of the +2 to Conjuration and Transmutation, replaced it to +1 Transmutation and Evocation. So the net result is Evocations get +1, Conjuration spells get -2, which is pretty crappy. I mean, there are definitely some Conjuration spells that some caster druids like to use. So what are those? That's Evocation. I think Ice Flowers. Oh, that's Transmutation, so people would have lost a 1 DC to that. And then Creeping Doom is Conjuration. Don't think there's a save for that. No, what else? No save for that. That's Evocation. I know there definitely are some spells that some people like to use, like Fire Seeds. That's Transmutation, so that would have got a -1 as a result. What else? Enveloping Swarm is Conjuration. Oh, this acts differently than before, so you functionally wouldn't have got a minus to this one because it was not, you know, this has actually, I'll just mention this now. Before it used to be like this stupid little buff that acted as a guard, and it would literally just do like 1 or 2 damage to mons that attacked you, which, you know, by today is meaningless. Even when they came out with it, 2012, it was kind of dumb, but this has been totally changed. It's not a guard, it's not a buff anymore. It's actually an acid dot. So druids gained a dot. Awesome change. Really happy about that. And but it's Conjuration spell. What's Flame Strike? That's Evocation. I thought there were some other popular Conjuration spells. Snares, Transmutation. Fire Trap. That's Abjuration. Splinter Bolt, Conjuration. Never really used that one too much. Entangles, Transmutation. Okay, well, damn, I'm not sure. Okay, moving on. Where were we? Australia. Okay, so, and then you get +1 bonus to caster level and max caster level in both seasons. So, Overall, it got a little bit of a boost, but I'm a big believer that Capstones ought to be something pretty special, and this is not. Especially when you compare it to like some of the newer Capstones, like Warlock Capstones are really nice. I just think that it should have been better, especially given that Druid, you know, like I already said, is so far from OP. It would have been really nice if we could have had a nice Capstone. So it definitely doesn't, you know, if you're trying to multi-class a couple levels of fighter in here or something, or a level of fighter and a level of wizard is also pretty popular. This is a Capstone that, you know, you're not going to lose a lot of sleep over giving this one up. I have it. I'm pure Druid, but, you know, there's definitely an argument to be made to taking a level of fighter and a level of wizard and just going 18 Druid. All right. So, moving up to the enhancements tier 1 Beguile. I really like this one, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to try to work this one in. I'm really tight. You know, I gave up some other things that I used to have, but this does just a fantastic job of just slowing mobs down to a crawl. Especially if you know if you're fighting a stubborn orange name or something like that, when that starts stacking up. I mean, they just are in super slow motion when that stacks up on them. But it only affects one mob at a time. But I used to like this one, but now that it's not a requisite for the SLAs, and because I'm so tight on the action points, that's one I've chosen to forego. I really wish they had just made this part of the innate line, and that's another point that I argued for. But and I think in doing that, they could have made way for some more important things, and I'll mention that now because the next item is something that boosts the wolf. And so Shared Spirit here affects your wolf companion gets up to 10% maximum health, and then you get some universal spell power, which is really silly there. I think they should have taken that out and done more to help the wolf. But the thing that irks me about this is this does not affect summons and hirelings and charms. To me, that would have been a no-brainer that all, you know, that usually things that improve your wolf also affect, you know, like augment summoning, for example. It affects your druid's wolf, it affects charms, it affects summons, it affects hirelings. Druid past lives, for example, do that too. So it was a no-brainer to make this affect all of those, and yet they just made it affect the wolf. And 10% is not enough. The wolf is so weak that it really needed more of a boost. And so, for example, if they had taken Beguile out and just added it in the innate line, that would have been a nice little perk. You know, that, you know, maybe in tier 3, 4, and 5, that could have been the tier 1, 2, and 3 of Beguile. You know, the more innate line you had, the more Beguile you had. That would have freed this spot up to have something that boosts your wolf. They should have had a whole line, at least 3 enhancements that boost wolf, summons, and hirelings and charms. So, yeah, bummed that this is wolf only. Bummed that they didn't add more to affect all those things. They did talk about maybe some interest in having future trees added, possibly a summoner tree, but you know, who knows if that'll ever happen, and if it does, who knows when. In the meantime, I think that the Season's Herald tree would have been a good place for it, and I think there were easy ways to make room for it, and taking out Beguile, putting it in the innate line would have freed up one more spot. Moving on to the Produce Flame SLA, so the cooldown was reduced, I believe it was 6 seconds before, now it's 4. So it was reduced by about, what, a third? That's about how much all of the SLAs were reduced by. And the projectile speed of Produce Flame was increased dramatically. Before, it used to be laughably slow, and because it was so slow, a lot of people just didn't even bother using it, even though I loved using it. You know, you just had to know how to use it. But it was so slow before that you could literally outrun it, is how slow it was. But let me show you now. It's really quick now. Get a little closer. It's really quick now. I was hoping it would just, you know, speed it up to like Magic Missile, but now it's like, you know, like a Ray spell fast. So that's awesome. back to enhancements. The wax and wane line has not changed, except I think that the spells that are affected by it as a result of what season you're in have been increased. So in that sense, the wax and wane affects more spells than it used to before. The Druidic Wisdom, this is the same as before. You can get up to +4. Or no, it's not the same. I think this used to be at tier 3. You would get a bonus like 5 to spellcraft. So this was changed a little bit. So I can't remember exactly what it was before. It was a boost to some skills, I believe. But now it's just Diplomacy, Heal, Spellcraft up to +4. Okay, over here on the Metamagic side, before we used to just have this one here, and then the Efficient Metamagic Heighten, and they added a second one, so what's really nice is you can get Efficient Metamagic, like Maximize and Empower, which is really nice if you need to conserve spell, if you want to reduce the spell point cost of your spells. I used to run with the Maximize one, but there was just so much I wanted in Dragonborn that was one of the things that I let go after update 38. So here's another thing that I think they could have taken out. I think that having 3 efficient metamagics is overkill for a caster druid. I think they could have taken this one out since they added this other one, and then replace that with another thing that boosted your wolf and your summons and hirelings. So they could have 1, 2, 3 things that could have been a 3 enhancement line to boost all those things. And I had made those suggestions prior to when they were previewing this. Okay, the next tier over here is Creeping Cold. The cooldown this is one SLA that did not change as far as the cooldown. It is still 8 seconds. I don't think anything was changed about Creeping Cold. Wax and Wane line. Spell power boost, this is the same as before, up to 30 action boost to universal spell power for 20 seconds. 2 points of wisdom are available here on the right, that's the same as before. The whole wax and wane line is the same. Call Lightning, again, all SLAs were moved down a tier. It has a 6-second cooldown, that might have been 8 seconds before. I think that it was. I don't think any other changes were made to this. I know there were some spells whose damage dice, that was made to scale better. I don't think Call Lightning was, but Call Lightning Storm was. And I think that would have been a nice SLA to add. I mentioned how I wish they would add something better to make that capstone more enticing, like a Call Lightning Storm SLA would have been really cool. Or another suggestion I made was to turn the tornado pots that we got years ago from the anniversary event, I think it was the card event or something, one of the old anniversary events, to turn that into a spell, because there's actually a druid spell called Whirlwind, 7th level spell, I believe it is in pen and paper, that is basically that. And so it would have been a natural to give them something like that. It was already in the game. I had suggested that, but it didn't get any traction, unfortunately. And that would have been a really neat thing to give caster druids some flair and some extra power, which I think that they still need. Call Lightning, such an awesome spell. You can one-shot a lot of heroic mobs with that, and obviously in Reaper mode damage is reduced, so you're not going to be one-shotting too many mobs in Reaper mode. But in any event, it's still a great spell, and with the moving it down a tier, you can get it at level 3, which is just so awesome. Okay, the efficient metamagic hasn't changed. This is something new. The Autumn Winds is there used to be something called Autumnal Susurrus, and they did away with that, and this is, I guess, sort of took its place. Although it's totally different, it's just something that took its physical place. This is for a single action point. You get Feather Fall, 3 dodge, and 10% chance to knock down enemies that strike you in melee. So awesome. I mean, I can't believe it's only 1 action point. So cool. Feather Fall and the dodge and the knockdown chance for your enemies is great. That is a toggle, which I have up here in my buff bar. You can turn it off. That's what gives you the little whirlwind effect. Turn it back on, and now I'm a little tornado again. And get some leaves going around me. Those leaves seem to be lost when you zone though, but it looks pretty cool. Alright, so Spring's Resurgence is basically the same as before, except that the cooldown for it was changed to ultimately 2 seconds when you have it maxed out. 8 seconds, I think, was the same as it was before for Tier 1, but they reduced it quite a bit up to Tier 3. But I don't have the points to get the 3rd tier, so just Tier 1 is going to have to be good enough. It doesn't do any extra healing when you bump it up. It's just you get a lower cooldown when you bump up to Tier 2 and 3. Still an awesome ability. This is highly overlooked, especially in heroics. Can be a lifesaver in traps. This thing, it's an auto heal that kicks in when you drop below 50% health, and can save you in situations where you would otherwise die, even when you take damage that would take you to below 10 hit points or whatever your death threshold is. This can save you. I always use it, even in right up through endgame. Strength of Solstice, I think this is the same as before, +1 to the DCs of evocation and transmutation spells. Okay, now we got a new SLA, Salt Ray. So new SLA, hell yeah, give it to me. Not sure this would have been my first choice, although, you know, when I remember when they were previewing it, I was like, you know, I never really used it, didn't like it, but I actually do use it a lot now, and I do like this. I would have liked to have seen another SLA added in addition to this new one, but it is pretty cool. The amount of damage that it does is not impressive at all, but it is a stunning attack, so it's a ranged stunning spell, and it like stuns virtually everything in the game. I can't think of any mobs other than Reapers that aren't stunned by it. I mean, you can stun undead, you can stun golems, you know, like everything. So I'll just show you what that looks like. It's just a spell I never really bothered to use, and I thought that I had heard that the stunning effect was broken on it or something, but you know, I'm not really sure. And I'm talking about before update 38. I had heard that the stunning effect was broken on it, but you know, I'm not sure about that. In any event, it does stun mobs now. It has a really long range. It's really cool. You can like, for example, stun a beholder before you get in range of it, in range of its anti-magic. So that's a really cool use for it there. You can see I just stunned that drow warrior there with it. Didn't do a lot of damage, but yeah. And I like to actually load up the regular spell too. You know, it has a pretty quick cooldown, so I can, you know, you can stun R10 mobs with this. That was the Ender set proccing, doing the Finger of Death animation. Okay, where are we? So Salt Ray, pretty cool. I use it a lot. Alright, Crown of Summer. So this was changed. It's still a buff that you do on yourself, or you can give it to somebody else. You can only, you know, have one target at a time. So it's, you know, it's great to give it to a tank, you know, if they're tanking a raid boss or something. Other than that, you'd probably generally want to keep it on yourself, unless you were really more of a traditional caster keeping way in the back, and maybe you want to give it to one of the melees in your party. So one of the great changes, and this was something that I had been requesting for a long time, is that it used to act as a weapon buff. And the problem with that is it conflicted with other weapon buffs. You know, you can only have one weapon buff at a time. So whether that's RD buffs or a Druid has a weapon buff. You know, so for example, like, well, Druid only has one weapon buff, which is Fires of Purity. Adds a little bit of fire damage to your weapon. But you couldn't have Crown of Summer and Fires of Purity on your weapon before because they were conflicting weapon buffs. This used to add some, like, 2d4 or 2d6 light damage or something like that. But now, instead of acting as a weapon buff, it just gives the target 10 melee power and 5 ranged power. So that's a great change. So that way you can have Crown of Summer on yourself and a weapon buff on your weapon. And in addition to the melee and range power, you also get 15% enhancement bonus, the healing amplification, which is really cool. That part of it has not changed. But one of the really cool things that has changed is that they added a visual effect to it, and you actually get like this wreath of butterflies around you. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm just going to step out into the light, and I'm going to zoom in, and you can see I get butterflies around my head. How cool is that? I mean, that is just a beautiful flavor addition. And I give props to somebody in the Players Council who had suggested this and even made a beautiful mock-up of it using, I think they cut and paste maybe the butterflies like out of the veil or something like that. And, you know, I was like, hell yeah, that would be so cool to have that, but didn't think that the devs would actually implement it, but they did. And that was a suggestion from somebody on the Players Council. So, super cool. Really, you know, you can't really see them from far away, but I still think that's really cool. You know, they give the druid some visual effects. You know, not only the water or the fire moving off of you, but you got your little whirlwind and you got your butterflies. So you're very druidy now, very child of nature-y. That was a really nice flavor addition, I think. Okay, so this is something new, Elemental Mastery, and so this is available in Tier 5, and you gain 15 additional spell power in your season, which is kind of meh. You know, that's three action points to get that. It also has, if you're Druid level 17 or above, changing into fire or water elemental form gives you Anger of the Noonday Sun or Mantle of the Icy Soul automatically, which is really nice. You know, before it was, you know, a little clunky. You know, you changed forms and you want, you know, if you were changing into water elemental form, then you would want to, you know, put your mantle on, and that was just another spell you had to cast. You know, but Anger of the Noonday Sun before was so lame that you typically, you know, I think most people didn't even bother using that. But if you were switching over to fire elemental form and you were switching back to water, you know, like I said, or you switch to whatever form, you have to recast Mantle Icy Soul. And this is a really nice convenience thing that I have. At first I didn't think I was going to use this, but I do enjoy it. I do like that when I switch forms, and I'll show you. Here I'll switch to fire elemental form. You can see it automatically applies Anger of the Noonday Sun. Only a 17-minute version. I really wish that would have applied a 20-minute version, but or like a permanent version. In any event, I guess this is good enough. And then if I change to water elemental form, Mantle of the Icy Soul automatically applied. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, Word of Balance. This has not changed other than the cooldown was reduced. This is a great spell. I know a lot of people lobbied for the spell spell resistance check on it to go away because it's like one of only 2 druid spells that have a spell pen check. And people just didn't feel like it was thematically appropriate. In any event, it still does have a spell pen check associated with it. Probably not worth investing in spell penetration on a druid because, you know, it's just Finger of Death and this, and, you know, if you're probably not the greatest thing to be investing in like necromancy resources on a druid, at least hardcore. But, you know, if you wanted to, you could, and I definitely started using Finger of Death in heroics now with Reaper mode, because it has been really nice to be able to, you know, one-shot like a stubborn champion or, you know, casters, for example, in Reaper mode. And I got it to work a little bit in epics too. Druids don't have anything like, you know, enervation or energy drain, which was a really nice way if you're like on a, you know, a divine or an arcane to, you know, if you didn't have the greatest DCs, you know, a favorite trick is to hit them with energy drain, which lowers their saves, and then hit them with Finger of Death. So even though we don't have energy drain or enervation, we do have something similar in that Mantle of the Icy Soul reduces the fortitude saves of targets of your cold spells by 4. It doesn't say it there, but it should here. Yeah. -4 penalty, reflex, and fortitude saves. So what you can do is like hit your target of your Finger of Death with like, you know, a cheap little cold spell like your SLA of Creeping Cold, and then throw Finger of Death. That's what I've been doing in heroics when I was doing my heroic racials. So that reduced their save by 4. That's pretty solid. And then, you know, I've got most of my wizard and favorite soul pass lives, so that really helps with spell penetration there. They did take away the spell penetration. You could get up to plus, I think, 3 spell penetration in the tree. They took that right out. Some people were upset by that. I think it's a good thing that they took it out, but I'm not sure that it was necessarily replaced with the greatest things. But I think it's better that it made room for other things. I used to advise people not to invest in spell penetration on a druid because you just didn't have enough spells to warrant that. But, you know, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Time and Tide, +1 caster level, max caster level spells you in both seasons. I think... yeah, I think that's the same as before. I think that you used to have, like, Time here and Tide here, but then there was also the Time and Tide here. So that's the same. And then Winter's Heart has been totally redone. So this used to be an enhancement that made it so before update 38, it was an enhancement that made it so that when you cast cold spells, there was a chance it basically procced a snowball swarm centered on the druid, which sounded cool, but the problem with it is it didn't scale with spell power, so it did such a minuscule amount of damage that it just wasn't worth it. I wish that they had made it scale with spell power. Then I think that could have been cool, but I do really like what it is now. So totally different now. What it is now is essentially shining through, like the Warlock, the Enlightened Spirit Warlock thing, where you click it and you get a bunch of temporary hit points. It's not quite as good as Shining Through because these temporary hit points only last 30 seconds and the damn cooldown is a minute. And another thing that irritates me about this is when this came out, the cooldown was 30 seconds and then they changed it without even announcing it. They changed it to a minute. So I'm not really happy about that. They never have really acknowledged it so much. I did ask, I did get a dev response, but the dev response wasn't you know, it was kind of thing. You know, I asked, like, was this an intended change? And the response in the forums was more like, you know, well, it must be, kind of thing. You know, it wasn't real definitive, and there was no explanation as to why. So, yeah, it just changed like in a patch or two after update 38. In any event, it is a really nice boost of temporary hit points, equal to 8 times your Wisdom modifier. So last 30 seconds. So unlike Shining Through, because they only last 30 seconds here, you can't hit it and like hold the charge per se. Like you can't hit it and hold all those temporary hit points, and then by the time you use them up, you know, hit it again like you can with Shining Through. In any event, it's nice to have, especially in Reaper mode. Can act as a great emergency self-heal or something you can toss on yourself when you're going into a big mob or there's a Reaper nearby or something like that. I just love it. Okay, that's all of the season's Herald enhancements. So I'm going to go over some of the Nature's Protector enhancements that I like to use. Because I'm spending 17 points here. I didn't used to have any points spent in any of the other Druid trees. There used to only be one other Druid tree. But Nature's Protector, because I am like a tanky caster, this has a lot of great defensive options. And even if you're not a tank like I am, there's still great stuff that you can get. Some low-hanging fruit for a relatively low investment. So right away, it says you gain 8 hit points and 3 magical resistance rating for every additional core in the tree. You get 16 hit points and 3 more MRR. So that's money right there. That's some good hit points. That's some good amount of MRR. So even right there, even if you just had like 1 extra point left over, you could stick it there, for example. In Tier 2, this Nature's Defense is a stance. It says Defensive Combat Stance, so you actually have to put it in your buff bar and activate it. There it is right there. I do keep that active at all times. That stance doesn't interfere with anything else that I do. It doesn't interfere with spell casting in any way. It doesn't slow down cooldown times or anything like that. So I just run with it at all times. And so you here with that defensive combat stance on, I get +8 PRR and MRR says cannot be used with other defensive stances, but can be used while raging. I don't have any other defensive stances, so that's not a problem for me. I don't know exactly what all other stances it conflicts with, but no doubt things like Sacred Defender or whatever it's called from Paladin, and the Fighter Stalwart Defender. And then Tier 3, in addition to getting those other core effects, the MRR and hit points, here you get, well, it says while in animal form, your penalty to spell cooldowns reduced from 2.5 to 2.0. Doesn't stack with Nature's Warrior versions of that ability, but you get heavy armor proficiency granted. And I am a big advocate of caster druids using heavy armor, even if you're not a tank like me. Like, I think it's really worth the extra PRR. Who doesn't love survivability? There's lots of great non-metal armors now, heavy armors, and before I used to spend a feat on heavy armor proficiency. Now I don't have to. It's auto-granted in Magical Beast, Tier 3, and that freed up a feat slot for me. Very cool. And in addition to getting heavy armor proficiency from Tier 3, which this is just a 11-point investment, you get hit points and MRR and PRR along the way. So who doesn't love that? Seriously. So here, well, let's talk about this first. Fey Blessing, 6 bonus to MRR. That's money. Love it for 3 action points. That's good for me as a tank. Here's another one. Good Thick Hide, good for me as a tank. 6 natural armor. A more traditional caster druid isn't going to be interested in something like this, but because I'm trying to improve my armor class and defenses, these things really appeal to me. Okay, so these ones here, Enchanted Defense and Grizzled Defense, these are things that will affect you while your Nature's Defense stance is active. So here, I'm getting plus 12 competence bonus to PRR and MRR. That's awesome. And remember, that stance doesn't interfere with spellcasting or any of your other abilities in any way. And then here, I've got plus 3 to all my saving throws. A plus 3 sacred bonus to all saving throws while that stance is active. Just love it. And then up here, you can get, I got a point of Constitution. I mean, I was there. Hell yeah, give it to me. And then there are other things. If you like here, this also is affected, or things that when you're in Nature's Defense stance, but you have to be in bear form. But you can get some big bonuses to like hit points and Constitution there, which I'm not going to go over because I don't use. I'd love to, but being in animal form severely affects the cooldown of spells. Not your SLAs though. So like I have a friend who does a build was doing a build very similar to mine, but running in bear form, because you can be even tankier. So if you were doing something similar to me but wanted to be even tankier, you could do like a bear version of that, and just try to focus on your SLAs. And if you do that, then the longer cooldowns of spells may not bother you as much, and that was what he was telling me, and you can get some giant hit points out of that. Okay, that's the enhancements. Let's see, what else can we mention? We can go over some changes to spells. So like I said, Call Lightning Storm was made to scale better with your level. So that's another change. And the spell Elemental Toughness was changed in a good way too. So before update 38, this used to add DR5, which was really cool in heroics. Maybe not in Reaper mode so much, diminishing diminished performance, or less meaningful in any event. But now they changed it to adding 1 PRR that stacks per druid level, so that's an extra 20 PRR. So look at this. Boom, 20 PRR. Give it to me. Kind of irritating that it only lasts 13 minutes, but instead of 1 minute per level, but it's still a really cool change. And since I got my numbers up, I'm gonna go ahead and drop out of the Nature's Protector stance, and you can see how my numbers change. 244 PRR, 152 MRR, drops by 20 on both. and then my saves are affected too. Okay, what else? Let's pull up the spells. Another really cool change is that Creeping Doom used to be a poison spell, which was kind of neat because poison could affect some mobs that maybe your other elemental spells couldn't, but now actually a druid can damage like virtually anything, which I'm going to go over in a minute. So this was changed. Instead of doing poison damage, which was a little awkward because there was no way to increase poison damage for spells, it has been changed to acid. So in this, if you haven't used Creeping Doom much, is an awesome spell. This is one that is laughably slow to reach its target, so that's something that made me not use it, you know, in the beginning, but then, you know, people encouraged me to give it another try, and it's actually an AoE dot, so when it hits its target, which can take a while to happen, it then splashes onto any mobs around it, and then they're affected by that acid dot. So that is really, really cool. And so, you know, now a druid has 4 dots, you know, 2 cold dots and 2 acid dots. Really, really awesome. So really love that change, Creeping Doom. Really love the change to Enveloping Swarm, giving us another acid dot. That was just awesome. Okay, so changes were made to Mantle, Icy Soul, and Anger of the Noonday Sun. Remember, these are auto-applied to you if you have the enhancement when you change elemental forms. Mantle, Icy Soul when you go into water elemental form, and Anger of the Noonday Sun when you go into fire elemental form. Once you're level 17 and you have elemental mastery. So the changes that were made to this is that basically targets, you can, if you have Mantled Icy Soul on, you can hurt anything with cold damage now. And so the first time you hit a mob that would otherwise be immune or resistant to or potentially healed by cold, it's going to act normally. But it gives that mob a debuff that subsequent attacks with cold spells or any type of cold will do full damage. So for example, an undead mob that would be immune to cold, I can, you know, if I have Mantle Icy Soul going, I can hit him with a cold spell like my first, you know, creeping cold SLA. The first tick, it would be immune, but then every successive cold attack on that mob, while it has that buff, is going to do full cold damage, which is so awesome. You know, I just did a quest video of Legendary Elite to Curse the Sky, which is a quest that I could not solo on Legendary Elite prior to update 38, at least not with my normal setup, because there were so many Abishai in that quest that they're so highly resistant or immune to, you know, virtually all of a caster druid's native damage types that it just wasn't realistic for me to solo that. It definitely, I was good in there, you know, helpful in there in a group. You know, I could cast Earthquake, I could tank mobs. So the druid's not useless in there. It was frustrating for me that I couldn't solo a quest like that before, but now I can because of the way that Mantle makes any mob be able to take cold damage. And Anger of the Noonday Sun was changed in the same way with fire damage. So any mob that was immune to fire, healed by fire, or resistant to fire can now take full damage. So a devil can be hurt by fire now, like Eretrikos, for example. You hit him with your first fire spell, he'll be immune, but then it puts that debuff on him, and every subsequent fire attack, as long as that debuff is on him, is going to do full fire damage. You can even do fire damage to an Iron Golem in this way. So like an Iron Golem was normally healed by fire, you can actually hurt an Iron Golem with fire damage with this. So that was a really, really cool change. And you know, there were some situations, again, like with To Curse the Sky, where you know, I just didn't feel like I had very many spells that were useful against a lot of the mobs in that quest. So now, you know, I can go ahead and freely use my fire or cold spells on any mob I want to. Really, really cool. Mantle Icy Soul is still way better than Anger of the Noonday Sun, but Anger of the Noonday Sun was so bad before that most of the time I don't think people even bothered to use it. I certainly didn't typically, but now because it makes all mobs take affected by fire, it's definitely worthwhile to use Anger of the Noonday Sun. But I had one of the things that I said is they should do is that they should make it more competitive with Mantle. They didn't, but it is definitely worth using now. It's definitely really awesome. It's just not as awesome as Mantle. Well, I think that's all I'm going to go over. I think in the end, I think they made some really good changes to Druid, and like I said, I don't think they quite did enough. I think because Druids are so far behind, caster Druids are so far behind the power curve, that there definitely was room to do a little bit more. Maybe give them another SLA, bump up the power somehow a little bit more without bringing Druids anywhere close to being overpowered. So, if you think I missed something, make a comment. I will put a link to my build post in the video description in case you're interested in that, and where I have a list of all of the enhancements that I take and all my gear and everything like that if you're interested. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions about my videos, you can respond on YouTube. And if you have any questions about my build, you can respond on my build post in the Druid forums.